I do think that we have seen sort of a shriller form of journalism and you know, a more partisan, a parting of the ways. Now, there'd be an argument now that, to a certain extent, Fairfax would roll in behind the Labor Party a bit, and some would say the ABC, of course, would dispute
News
that.
to me.
And that News Limited clearly has decided to cast its lot with the coalition.
That's not news to me.
Yeah, so I think that, you know, and again, there'll be arguments about that, you know, and I'm not going to cast my lot on one side or the other. However, I do think that there is a more partisan tone in what we're seeing now.
And is this, why is that? There's no reason in technology for it to be partisan, is there?
But I think it's a ghettoisation because you're trying to find people who will follow you.
Yes. And I've heard this. Again, a colleague of yours said to me, we used to challenge our readers, now we pander to them.
Fox News in the United States, I think, is the classic example where you have possibly the most successful television news station in the United States, which makes no bones about the fact that it is utterly partisan. I mean, you know, it's the sort of stuff I find difficult to watch. You know, I watch it for a brief period of time, and then it becomes so repetitious in terms of the ideology, and so narrow. Like, you know, and again, this is commercial news media. I have no real problem with any of this because in the end, people can spend their money in whatever way they want. People can consume whatever they want. But there has been, I think, certainly in the United States, a ghettoisation in the way that people, because there were reactions to Fox, obviously, more liberal networks decided they'd do the same thing.
So they went their way.
Yep.
Yeah. So that the more liberal ones, we're talking in Australian parlance, we think liberal is conservative, but you mean the more progressive ones.
That's right.
They then went after the progressives as their audience, and Fox went after having gone after the conservatives for their audience.
Yeah, look, there is actually, even in the United States, where it's much more pronounced than here, people talk about the fact that people are now almost deciding to live in the same suburbs that have the same worldviews.
Yeah,
and I don't know if that's helped to drive what we see as the sort of uber partisanship now that we've seen in the United States, but certainly, you know, Congress seems to have got.
It doesn't seem to have done the US democratic system much good, does
it?
No,
it's got to the point of dysfunction.
You know, we've seen debt ceiling limits and all of this, and the huge fights about fiscal cliffs and so on. Is this possibly a direction that Australia might head through? Isn't it a fascinating discussion, Chris? Because technology is driving partisanship to an extent because you're, as a commercial media outlet, seeking out your audience and trying to capture it. That's what you're really saying.
It's become more narrowcasting. Yeah. I think what we've seen now is that what used to be broadcasting, and they are the only available forms, so you consumed them. If you were interested, you had to consume the papers that were available or television stations that were available. They had to appeal to a broad base of an audience. You couldn't just try and pander to a particular worldview. What's happened now is we've seen a complete shattering of the audience across so many different platforms, across so many different styles, that people can ghettoise now, that you can seek out news that actually is a reflection
of your own views, your worldview.
And let's face it, we all like that. How many times, and I know,
look, it's in the paper,
I know.
It's on the telly.
How many times have you read an article which you thought complete nonsense because I just basically don't agree with it or with the premise or not, and then you find something that reflects what you think, and you think that person's just spot on, and then you email it to your friend saying this person knows what they're talking about, and that person's a fool. Yeah. And so it's a natural human tendency. It's now being pandered to by the media. I think this is one of those chicken and egg arguments, but you know, we're now in a cycle where perhaps it's the politics is driving, the media is driving politics.
Is it a cycle or a death spiral? Because if you keep chasing your audience and pandering to it, the social media is going to increase, is not going to